The courtiers all had shocked expressions. It's just that was what made it difficult. We had doubts about it being a conspiracy precisely because it was so easy to find the culprit. Would you be so kind as to give me a bit more time? Of course, we have to investigate the exact details of this incident, but given the situation any amount of intel would be helpful. Can you report on what you have figured out, what you are absolutely certain of? As you wish, my king. What we are certain of is that the criminals in question include the one known as Baron Philip Dayton Montserrat and his serfs. The courtiers began to speak. Montserrat. Have you heard of that name? A baron and his serfs attacked the convoy. Were they trying to avenge someone who died in the battle? Perhaps he's one of those that does not put much thought into their actions. Emotions could lead one to go on unexpected rampages, couldn't they? In the midst of this, the one to speak up was the Minister of Justice, who appeared to be pretty miffed. Your Majesty, this has to be a scheme of the Sorcerer's kingdom, correct? Your servant could not fathom why a noble of the kingdom would mastermind something like this. I concur. Is the Sorcerer's kingdom not a country that would nonchalantly use charm person in their courts? It is entirely possible that they couldn't care less about using equally sleazy methods on a national level. For example, was that baron being controlled using charm person? The phrase "I see" could be heard throughout the room. Zanac couldn't help but feel regret for leaking that information after hearing the accusations the minister made in the second half of Rhetoric. If that's the case, we need to offer protection to that baron as soon as possible. Though I'm not too versed on the matter, I have heard that the spell called Charm Person leaves the victim with the memory of what happened when the spell was cast on them. Therefore, he would not remain silent. Zanac wasn't as knowledgeable in magic as the minister, so he had made a rookie mistake. Summon that baron. Investigate what had happened. At the same time, protect him. My King Zanac did not want to say so, but after steeling himself he said, after we find out what had happened, could we offer the head of that baron as an apology to the Sorcerer's kingdom? What are you talking about? His father's gaze was sharp enough that it felt as though it was piercing right through him. Even when he was reduced to a skinny old man, the man who had borne the title of king for the longest time, still had an aura that was worthy of praise. I doubt I have the same level of majesty, but I won't back down so easily. Even if this was a scheme by the Sorcerer's kingdom, was it really worth fighting a battle on the battlefield the enemy had specially prepared for themselves? He was terrified of the prospect that they would be continually arguing back and forth about whether it's a scheme or it's not a scheme up to the point when they will be engaged in a full-scale war. Rather than wait for things to get to that point, it would be better to just give up the head of the noble who had started it all sooner than later, and hope that it would de-escalate the situation. It would be absolutely foolish to fight an opponent who had already demonstrated their superior powers in their previous battle. If a war was to occur, it was hard for him to imagine that the nobles who knew about that tragedy would still send their levies. Even if they were willing to send their own soldiers, they would just be endangering themselves. My king, I believe that we should avoid a war with the Sorcerer's kingdom. And so you would be willing to offer an innocent noble as a sacrifice? Is it something the heir to the throne should say? My son, think before you speak. Zanac licked his lips and replied. My answer remains the same regardless of what the others may say. I believe that it's imperative for us to avoid a large loss of life with a small sacrifice. If we were to do that, should we just hand over the head of another loyal servant every time the Sorcerer's kingdom comes knocking on our door? Do you understand that simple logic? I understand, but father should have seen the tragedy of the Cat's Plains which I had not. Would you still risk conflict with the Sorcerer's kingdom with that in mind? His father let out a sigh and curled his lips into a straight line. Zanac pressed home his advantage by following up with, I am against the idea. Allow me to repeat myself, I believe that a war with that kind of country should be avoided at all costs, even if we have to sacrifice an innocent noble. His speech was hardly fit for the heir to the throne. He might get called weak behind his back, and lose the loyalty of a few courtiers because of this, but Zanac believed that this was the only path through which the kingdom would survive. Your Majesty. Your servant supports His Highness's proposal too. The one to agree with him was the Minister of Internal Affairs, but he was about to add on to Zanac's proposal. Your Majesty, your servant understands your desire to protect all citizens. So how about we just become a vassal state of the Sorcerer's kingdom? The courtiers began shouting, what are you talking about? Have you lost your sense of honor? And so on. Upon hearing what the Minister of Internal Affairs had to say, the minister ignored them all with his gaze affixed towards Zanac's father. Faced with a suggestion that had branded the suggester a traitor, his father gradually let out a smile. That, I especially cannot do. That would be akin to betraying the loyalty of generations of people who had served this kingdom. How will we be able to face them then? I apologize to you, Earl. Thank you for your suggestion. Your servant did not deserve that apology. Zanac saw that they were communicating on the deeper level through their gazes. Would he be able to have courtiers who were this loyal? His father was a merciful man, but nothing more. No, perhaps it was because of this that talented people were willing to serve him. His father was exceptionally talented in recruiting people more talented than him, like the warrior Captain Gaza Strunov. Zanac felt that it was better for him to become king than his brother, who was more likely to become a puppet of the Eight Fingers or the noble faction, and doom the country than not. That was why he had worked together with Marquis Revan to become king or a powerful Grand Duke to prepare for the future. But now, Zanac couldn't help but feel inadequate compared to his sister's genius and his father's charisma. Even if he became the king, it wasn't likely that he would have made the kingdom a better place. The only thing he could do was to improve himself, but it wasn't such an easy task given his age and personality, plus he never wanted to self-improve anyways. He would probably keep his personality until death. Minister of Military Affairs, I want to propose a hypothetical. What could we do to win a war against the Sorcerer's kingdom? Could we form an alliance with another country before then? Are we to face them alone? Zanac, Ramposa III, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs exchanged gazes. Zanac, as their representative, answered with, "We have not been successful in forging an alliance with the Council State. We had begun negotiations with them way back, just after that battle had ended. We were not able to form an agreeable alliance back then. If they knew a relationship with the Sorcerer's kingdom has worsened, the chance of rejection would only go up. Is that so, then, Your Majesty, though this question may be out of line? What would you consider as the victory condition of this war? Do we have to drive the enemy off in battle? Or do we have to kill, or rather, destroy the Sorcerer King? If it's the latter, I do not believe that we have any chance at a victory at all. Minister of Military Affairs, that would not be the case. What if we only had to force the enemy to withdraw their forces? Let me think about it." The Minister of the Military tilted his head as he contemplated. He came up with the answer. Luck would have to be on our side, but if we were to march an army the long way around and occupy Irantal while their troops are still marching from Irantal towards the capital, we might have a chance to turn the tide of battle. We would have to break through their 3 layers of fortifications. Yes, Your Majesty. It would be something that could only be accomplished if we were able to sneak an army that is as large we can possibly muster past their defenses, which was why I said that luck had to be on our side. Of course, if the Sorcerer's King, the one who was capable of casting the terrifying spell without breaking a sweat, was to stay in Irantal, then this plan would undoubtedly fail. Another way to put this was that if luck was not on their side, they had no chance of victory at all. Zanac wasn't sure if his father understood the full implications of the minister's words. If that was the case, then if the Sorcerer's Kingdom had invaded us without a formal declaration of war, everything would have been over. A surprise attack would have rendered us unable to gather enough troops in time, in which case we wouldn't even be able to carry out the plan. It was the tradition for formal declarations of war to be passed between nations, a sort of gentleman's agreement or etiquette. To send a formal declaration of war was to send the message that our country respects etiquette to the other nations. If they did not do so, they would have been viewed as a barbaric nation, which would have had a seriously negative impact on their diplomatic efforts. Between nations of different races, this tradition was not often observed. However, even when nations of different races were involved, it depended on the age, history, diplomatic relations with their neighboring countries, and so on. So given this context, how would a nation ruled by the undead, which hates the living, conduct itself? Would they provide a formal declaration of war? My king. As I had expected, we would only have the slimmest chance of victory if we were to go to war. If that is the case, should we not try our best to avoid that outcome, by sacrificing a little? Sacrificing a little? Yes, my king. We should summon that baron at once and put him on trial. Afterwards, we will have him take responsibility for his actions regardless of the outcome, and off with his head. We can't do that, Zanac. To summon that baron and put him on trial would be fine, but if he was innocent or if we could declare his innocence, I will not do such a thing. I have a better plan in mind. A better plan? What is it? His father fell silent and shook his head. After witnessing that, Zanac concluded that his father was probably lying. If there really was a better plan, then he should say it out loud. If there wasn't, he was probably lying to cover for the fact that he had not thought of a good reason on why they should spare that nobleman. Zanac felt disappointed by his father and contemplated what he should do next. No matter how I look at it, the future of the kingdom seems grim. Looks like I will have to do it by force. First of all, it was a necessity for them to pin all responsibilities on that baron. Though the probability is slim, that baron may have been the source of all of their troubles anyways. In any case, if they could make that the truth, then their problems would be solved. However, Zanac couldn't think of a way to pin all responsibilities on him. What if he was to kill the baron on his way to the capital and then pin the responsibilities on him? His father wouldn't be able to say otherwise if that was the case. Even if his father objects to the plan, as long as he could pull it off on his own, everything would be fine. He had considered whether things would turn out this way the moment he had heard of the incident. He had already arrived at a conclusion back then. The grave crime of usurping the throne.